Have you ever had the strange feeling that someone was trying to tell you something, even when no one seemed to be around, as if a silent presence was there, just watching, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself? What if I told you that a child as young as 8 spent entire nights waking up to the same sight beside her bed, the serene figure of an angel, motionless, staring at her with eyes that seemed to pierce her soul? What begins as a simple dream, or at least that's what it seems, quickly turns into something deeper, more real, more urgent. At first, the presence doesn't say a word. It just appears night after night, always in the same place at the same time with the same expression. The girl at first feels peace, but as the days go by, this constant visit begins to carry another kind of feeling, the weight of something. That needs to be said, something she's hiding. This type of angelic intervention, as unusual as it may seem, is not as rare as one might think. There are countless accounts of people who have been saved by angels and who didn't even realize it. Sometimes divine signs come through a dream, a whispered voice at just the right moment, or even an invisible touch that prevents disaster, and in other cases, they appear as a reminder. It's time to tell the truth. The child at the center of this story tries to ignore the apparitions at first. Who would believe her anyway? An angel that appears every night in the same spot in the room. But there are things we simply cannot ignore for long, especially when the presence begins to seem closer, more intense, more determined, until one of those nights something different happens. The silence is broken. The angelic figure leans in and for the first time speaks. But it is not just any sentence. It is a clear, direct, and completely unexpected message. You need to tell the truth. Now. What could this child be? Hiding. Why would an angel from heaven appear night after night just to lead her to this moment? And most importantly, what happens when the truth finally comes out? If you've ever had a hunch that was too strong to ignore, a dream that felt like a warning, or a feeling that something out of the ordinary was trying to guide you, stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may surprise you. This is more than a story about faith or spirituality. It's about how the heavens move silently to protect, to warn, and sometimes to demand action that changes everything. And it is exactly from here that things start to get even more intense. Because when a divine presence breaks the silence, it is not just to comfort. Sometimes it is to confront, to awaken, to push someone, even a child, toward a decision that can no longer be postponed. The angel said nothing more that night. He simply observed, as if he already knew that the words had done their job. And there, in the middle of the night, something began to change inside her. A weight began to take shape, and with it the certainty that what she carried in secret could no longer remain hidden. It's curious how these stories, no matter how extraordinary they may seem, awaken memories in those who watch them. Maybe you've already experienced something similar, a dream so vivid that it seemed more like a message, a premonition that was impossible to ignore, or that strange sensation of being protected even when everything around you said otherwise. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what has touched you the most so far. Sometimes what you share ends up being exactly what someone else needed to read. And that's how we transform a video into a space for real exchange, a community where signs, stories, and experiences truly connect. And look, if this type of content resonates with you, if it makes your heart vibrate or brings you peace in the midst of the hustle and bustle of everyday life, take the opportunity to like the video. This not only shows that we are on the right track, but it also helps to spread this message to more people who sometimes need exactly this type of signal. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more hearts. Oh, and if you haven't signed up yet, do it now. Because there are still many stories that will move you, real profound stories that show that the sky continues to act, even in the quietest details of our daily lives. But back to our story. That same week, something unexpected happens, something that no adult noticed but that the angel had known from the beginning. Was it just a dream, or a clear sign from heaven? This question still echoes today in the minds of those who have experienced something that they cannot explain logically. Because there are experiences that completely escape rationality, but that leave deep marks, as if they had been written by something greater than us. And often it all starts simply. A recurring dream, a feeling that insists on coming back, a figure that appears out of nowhere, without context but with such a strong presence that it cannot be ignored. In this girl's case, each silent visit from the angel seemed to carry a hidden meaning. It wasn't a nightmare. There was no fear. What there was, in fact, was a kind of silent warning, a firm presence that only those who have felt it can understand. And this is something very common in reports of divine interventions. They don't arrive with fanfare. They don't shout, they don't force. They approach as if they respect the other person's time but already know the end of the story. The truth is that when there is something hidden, a secret, a pain, a regret, spirituality finds ways to touch the heart, to poke the soul, until transformation becomes inevitable. And this applies to any age. Children, adults, the elderly. All of us at some point in our lives carry invisible burdens. Some learn to cope. Others, silently, get sick inside. And that's where signs come in. They don't always come as obvious. Apparitions. Sometimes they appear as synchronicity, someone who says exactly what you needed to hear, a message that appears at just the right moment, a decision that changes everything, and only later do you realize that you were guided. Other signs are more subtle, like that feeling that something bad was about to happen, and suddenly something or someone stops you from leaving the house, from taking a path, from making a certain choice. It's in these silent backstage areas that angels act, without needing a stage but always with impact. Returning to the girl's story, the atmosphere around her began to change. The school was no longer the same. Teachers noticed his distraction. Classmates noticed his silence. Home. The parents were confused, not knowing what was happening. She, on the other hand, had the look of someone who was about to reveal something important. But fear. Oh, fear is a high wall for those who still don't understand the dimension of their own decisions. The secret she was hiding was not simple. It was a hidden truth that involved another person, a wrong attitude that she witnessed and that somehow put her in the middle of a dilemma. Speaking out would bring consequences. Keeping quiet would keep the pain going. And in the middle of this impasse, the angel returned, night after night, without changing his tone, without losing his patience. He did not force. He just waited, like someone who knows that sooner or later, the truth always finds a way out. What is impressive about this type of spiritual intervention is the patience with which the messages are delivered. Contrary to what many people imagine, angels do not act only as last-minute saviors. They also act as silent guides, subtle instigators of change, instruments of something greater that calls us to a journey of growth and awareness. They do not only appear when there is danger. Often they appear when there is a decision, when the soul is ready to stop hiding. And this makes us think about how many times we ignore the signs because we are too busy trying to handle everything. The truth is that many of us live on autopilot. We deal with pressures, responsibilities, external demands, but we forget to listen to what is inside. And it is precisely in this internal space that the most important messages arrive. They are not always words. Sometimes it is just a silence that speaks louder than the noise of the world. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding divine signs also requires a change of mindset. You need to learn to recognize when something seemingly normal carries a greater intention behind it. You need sensitivity to realize that certain coincidences are not so random after all, that there is an intelligence behind encounters, delays, pauses, and detours, and that, most of the time, what seems like a simple interruption is exactly what saves you. Comment here. I'm on this journey too, just so I know I'm not alone in this conversation, because this is where the real story begins to take shape. No longer as an abstract idea about spirituality or as a distant reflection on signs and messages, but as the concrete story of a girl of just 8 years old who lived an apparently ordinary routine until the invisible began to be part of her daily life in a way that was impossible to ignore. She was the kind of child who paid attention to everything, observant, sensitive, and with a vivid imagination, the kind who spends hours in silence but is creating entire worlds inside. But lately, something had changed. Her games lost their charm, her laughter became quieter, and her eyes, once full of sparkle, now carried a kind of tiredness that no one could explain. Her parents thought it was just a phase. The school said it might be a lack of focus, but no one could understand what was really going on inside. Only she knew. Only she felt that butterflies in her stomach that started every night, minutes, before going to sleep. And it wasn't fear. It was something different, as if her body already knew that something sacred was approaching, even before her eyes closed. It was always the same dream. The room was the same, with toys scattered around, and the star-patterned blanket pulled up to her chin. And there on the edge of the bed, an angel. He didn't say anything, I just looked. He had a serene, imposing, and at the same time sweet presence. It didn't have big wings or flashing lights around it, but it was impossible not to know it was him. And every time she saw him, something inside her tightened, as if he knew a secret she was trying to hide even from herself. For weeks, the angel said nothing. He just stared. But each night his expression changed. Little by little, the tenderness gave way to firmness. The peace that had once been comforting now carried a certain weight, as if time were running out. And then, on that particular night, he spoke. His voice was calm, but it seemed to cut through everything. "You must tell the truth, it is time." She woke up with her heart racing. She sat up in bed, looking around, hoping to find some sign of his presence. But everything was the same. And at the same time, everything had changed. The truth, that word kept hammering at her all day, as if the angel had planted something that was now growing uncontrollably inside her. She knew what he was talking about. It was a secret she had been carrying around with her for the past month, an episode that seemed small, but that made her uncomfortable every time she remembered it. She had witnessed something wrong, something that involved an adult close to her, something that, if revealed, could create a huge conflict. But the silence also made her feel bad. She felt more and more restless, more distant, more trapped inside herself. It is at times like these that we understand the difference between guilt and responsibility. She was not to blame for what she saw, but she was responsible for not letting that truth remain hidden, and that was exactly what the angel wanted to show her, not as a punishment, but as a key to transformation. Because the truth, even when it hurts, is liberating, and keeping something like that to herself, even though she was just a child, did not protect her. It only kept her from peace. From that day on, everything in her began to change. Not abruptly, but like a cycle that had finally started to turn in the right direction. She started to pay more attention to her own feelings. He began to write down what he felt in a notebook that he hid in the drawer, and little by little the words began to come out, first to the paper, then to the school therapist, and there, in that safe space, she was finally able to speak, without being judged, without fear of destroying anything. Just with the desire to finally take a deep breath without feeling guilty. What few people know is that, while all this was happening, the dreams continued. But now the angel smiled. He no longer appeared with a serious expression. He remained, there on the edge of the bed, but with a look of someone who recognized the courage that was emerging. It was like saying, "Now you get it." And that's where the spiritual impact begins to reveal itself. Because what seemed like just a dream was actually the catalyst for a choice, a decision that would change the course of not only her life, but that of those around her. This story, as specific as it may seem, echoes within many others, maybe not with a visible angel, maybe not with such a clear sentence, but with signs that repeat themselves, with premonitions that warn, with dreams that carry disguised messages. Spirituality does not choose the ready, it chooses the available, those who are open to perceive even in the midst of chaos, those who accept the journey even without knowing where it will lead. And the truth is that all of us, at some point, will be invited to look within and make peace with what is hidden. Sometimes what stops us from moving forward is not what others have done. It's what we haven't yet had the courage to say, feel, or face. Angels, when they appear, do not bring ready answers. They bring direction. And it's up to us to decide whether we're going to follow or remain in the dark. Comment here. That makes sense to me, just so I know that this conversation also touched you in some way. Because when we talk about secrets, we are not just talking about something hidden from others, but often about something that the person themselves tries to hide from themselves. In the girl's case, silence seemed to be the easiest solution. She believed that if no one knew, everything would be fine. But what she didn't know yet, and what many of us also took years to understand, is that what stays inside doesn't go away. It just changes shape. It started with a slight, almost imperceptible discomfort, a difficulty sleeping that she herself could not explain. Then came the nightmares, not about the angel, but about distorted situations that made her heart race. The fear of sleeping became routine, and each morning she woke up more tired. The teachers began to notice. The girl who had previously participated in class could now barely keep her eyes open. Her notebooks were blank. Her grades began to drop, and along with them came impatience, sadness, and isolation. At home, her moods fluctuated. One day she was too quiet, the next she would explode over anything. Her mother, distressed, said it was just a phase. Her father thought she was being moody. No one imagined that inside that little head there was a weight that to her seemed too big to carry and impossible to let go of. The secret, the one the angel had come to collect with such love and firmness, was not just information. It was a burden, a fragment of pain trapped between the mind and the heart. And the scariest thing is that this is not exclusive to children. How many adults walk around like this, living normally on the outside, but falling apart on the inside, pretending that everything is fine, while the body and soul scream for relief? This is where the silent power of spiritual interventions comes in. Sometimes we imagine that when an angel appears, he or she will protect us from an accident, rescue us from a tragedy, or free us from physical danger. But the truth is that often the greatest dangers are hidden in our own shadows. They are the unspoken truths, the swallowed sorrows, the stifled traumas that gradually make our system sick. And it is in these moments that something greater comes along, not to point the finger, but to free us. The angel's intervention in the girl's case was not about what she saw or about the other person's mistake. It was about her integrity, her freedom, her inner peace. When he said it's time, he wasn't just talking about talking, he was talking about healing, about letting go of the knot that bound her to silence, about making a decision that would change her state of mind. And this is a profound revelation about how spirituality works. The signs don't always come with a bang. Sometimes they come subtly, like a persistent nagging, a thought that won't leave your head, or that dream that repeats itself night after night. Have you ever felt this? That feeling that something needs to be resolved, said, faced, even if it doesn't make sense to others. It's because there is a hidden truth within each of us, and this truth, when ignored, begins to leak out everywhere. In the body, in the mind, in relationships. It starts with fatigue for no reason, pain that won't go away, anxiety that appears out of nowhere. But deep down, it's just the spirit trying to say, you need to look at this. The girl couldn't name any of this, but she felt everything, and as happens with many of us, it was the suffering itself that began to pave the way for change. Not because she suddenly understood everything, but because the pain became unbearable, and when the suffering speaks louder, the spirit begins to look for ways out. And that's when the signs gain strength. The angel began to appear more frequently, and little by little he stopped being just a visitor in her dreams. His presence was also felt during the day, in small synchronicities, in that feeling that she was being guided. At certain moments she felt a light warmth on her shoulders, as if someone were there. And strangely she felt more courage. Courage to admit what you saw, to tell the right person. Courage to stop protecting those who shouldn't be protected, and start taking care of yourself. And this courage, it's worth saying, didn't come alone. It was built in the silence of the night, in the eyes of the angel, in facing your own conscience. This story reminds us of something we often forget. how much our decisions impact our spiritual field. When the truth is suppressed, it disconnects us, and when it is revealed with integrity, it aligns us with our essence again. It is no wonder that, after telling everything, the girl went back to sleep peacefully, not because the problem was magically solved, but because she chose the truth. And maybe this is what you need to hear right now. The peace you seek may be on the other side of a conversation you haven't had yet, of a decision you've been putting off, of a secret you carry as if it were your own, but that perhaps wasn't even your fault. Divine intervention doesn't come to push you. It comes to remind you of who you are, even when you forget. It comes to reorient, reposition, realign, and often this starts with a simple gesture, saying what needs to be said. Write in the comments, "I'm on this journey too," because when we recognize what we feel, even in just a few words, something inside begins to change. Because the truth is that when something needs to be said, when an inner wound truly needs to be healed, spirituality goes to great lengths to reach us. And what begins as a soft whisper, a recurring dream, or a strange feeling can turn into something impossible to ignore. That's exactly what happened to that little girl. After so many nights accompanied by the angel's silent presence, the atmosphere around her began to change even more intensely. The signs that had previously been contained in the world of dreams now crossed that border, and they manifested themselves on the physical plane. Small things, almost imperceptible at first, but that, as the days went by, became too frequent to be called coincidence. The first time it was a pen that rolled off the table by itself. It was perfectly still. No wind around, no one around. She tried to ignore it. She thought maybe she had misplaced it. But deep down, she felt it. The same slight chill on the back of her neck, the same feeling that something was present. Then, it was a song. The kitchen radio turned on by itself. Her mother didn't even notice. She thought she had accidentally bumped it. But the song now was exactly the one that used to calm the girl in moments of anxiety. A song that her father had played when she was too young to understand the world, but that now came back with a different weight. She started paying more attention, and that's when she noticed the notebook. On the last page, written in her own handwriting, was a word she swore she hadn't written. Speak. That's it. Simple, direct, unquestionable. It was as if the invisible was starting to leave its fingerprints, as if the spiritual world was crossing the boundaries of the natural to ensure that the message was delivered. Was it a coincidence, or a clear warning from above? The most impressive thing is that these signs did not come with fear. They were not scary or invasive. They were messages full of intention, but also of delicacy. As if someone were saying, "You are not alone, we are here, and we want to help you." And it is curious to see how the invisible moves with precision. Nothing there was random, nothing was gratuitous, everything had a purpose. It is at this point that many people begin to question, how far does divine intervention go? Can angels really touch matter? Turn on a device, move an object, change a circumstance? The answer for anyone who has experienced something like this is not found in books or in theological debates. It's on impact, in the inexplicable certainty that something is happening, something bigger, something beyond our human logic. And when this starts to happen, the mindset changes. The person can no longer pretend that nothing is happening, because the spiritual world is no longer just whispering. It is calling firmly. It is opening doors, creating connections, breaking through layers of denial. This caused a profound transformation for the girl. She began to feel courage not only to speak, but to face what would come next. And this is perhaps one of the greatest proofs of spiritual action, when, even in the face of fear, you feel a strength that drives you. It is not the absence of pain nor the absence of risk. It is the presence of something greater than yourself, a peace that comes from within and not from without, as if someone were holding your hand, even if you cannot see it. And this type of manifestation, as rare as it may seem, is not as uncommon as we might think. There are many stories, many indeed, of people who have experienced similar signs. A perfume that appears out of nowhere and reminds you of someone who has passed away. A book that falls off the shelf right on the page that contains the answer you needed. a soft voice that echoes in your mind at just the right time, or even an unexpected delay that saves you from something worse. Coincidence? Maybe, but sometimes chance has too many fingers. The most important thing here is not to look for signs in everything, but to be open, to be sensitive. Because when you live disconnected, distracted, too hardened, the signs can happen right before your eyes, and you don't even notice. But when the heart opens, even silence begins to speak. Even everyday life becomes a message, and it is at this point that the spiritual framework reveals itself most clearly. There is indeed an invisible movement around us, a silent network of care, protection, and guidance, and in many cases, angels are the messengers of this. They do not appear to replace our decisions, nor to prevent us from going through difficulties, but rather to strengthen us on the path, to remind us that there is purpose, that there is direction, that there is presence. For the girl, this supernatural warning was the final push she needed. And perhaps it is what you are feeling too. That discomfort that has no name, that sign that repeats itself, that calling that insists. Spiritual life does not happen only in prayers or in churches. It also manifests itself in the details, in delays, in coincidences, in unexpected smiles, in dreams that seem more real than day. You need to be awake for this, and if all this is making sense to you now, write in the comments. That makes sense to me, because sometimes, just by recognizing that something inside has touched something outside, the transformation begins. And when we start to notice these signs, something inside changes. It's as if a new lens were placed before your eyes. Choices take on new weight. Silence begins to have a voice, and even the most ordinary days become full of hidden meanings. But I know, sometimes with so much information, it can be difficult to understand what it all means in practice. Where to start? How can we decipher these more subtle messages that spirituality sends? With that in mind, I have prepared something special for those who felt that this content touched them deeply. It is a complimentary, direct, and practical material that can help you take the next steps with more clarity. It is called Reading Your Birth Angel, and was designed to help you connect with personalized guidance from the angelic kingdom, especially in these times of intense transformation. If it makes sense to you, take a look at the material I left below. It's there in the description, but I'll give you a heads up. I might take it down in the next few days because this content is very specific and may not be available for long. So, if this resonates with what you're experiencing right now, take advantage of it while it's still available. This material complements what we talked about here and can save you a lot of time in practice, especially if you're going through a phase of doubt, transition, or searching for direction. She sat on the edge of the bed, her small hands clasped tightly in her lap, as if holding something that weighed more than her body could bear. The room was dark, lit only by a dim light coming from the hallway. And then, for the first time after so many nights, it was no longer the silence that spoke for her. It was her trembling voice, restrained, but firm enough to cut through the fear. She looked into the void, or rather, at the exact spot where she knew the angel would be, and said with teary eyes, "I saw it. I saw what happened. I didn't want to get involved, but I knew it was wrong to stay silent. I was afraid, very afraid." The air seemed thicker, as if even time had stopped to listen. A faint glow began to appear on the other side of the bed, and he appeared. The same. Angel as every night, but different now. The serious expression that the girl had come to recognize slowly melted, like ice melting in the sun. A soft smile formed, and his presence lit up the room in a way that was hard to describe. It wasn't physical light. It was as if the child's soul was receiving a silent, deep embrace that said everything without saying anything. "You did the right thing." Those words hung in the air with an almost sacred force. They came not only as a relief, but as a turning point. A milestone, as if from that moment on, everything that had been trapped inside her had finally found an outlet. And at that exact moment something changed, not only in the environment, but inside her, as if a cycle had ended. There were no fireworks, no major reactions, just a stillness so complete that only those who have faced their own abysses in silence can recognize it. This moment of revelation has a power that we often underestimate, because it's not just about what was said, but about what was finally released. There are truths that, when kept hidden, make us sick inside. And the most curious thing is that, when we tell them, it's not just about freeing the other person or resolving something external. It's about giving yourself back the right to move forward with ease. The transformation that begins there is not immediately visible. She slowly settles in, as if she doesn't want to draw attention. Dreams become calmer, the body begins to respond better, the eyes shine again, not because everything was resolved on the outside, but because an internal decision was made to no longer carry that alone. It is at this point that many people begin to realize the true impact of the choices they make on their inner selves. And when that happens early in life, like in that girl's case, something special is activated, an inner strength that matures slowly, but with admirable consistency. It's not every day that someone who is just 8 years old finds the courage to take a stand on something that most adults would try to hide. But this story shows that even in childhood, when the world seems too big, there is a conscience that guides us. And when it aligns with a greater force, like the angelic realm, decisions take on new meaning. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because there is a detail in this journey that few people realize. Many times divine intervention does not come just to protect us from what is outside. It comes mainly to wake us from what is dormant inside. Old fears, poorly digested memories, silent pacts with pain. All of this begins to dissolve when the truth is spoken out loud. And that is why the angel smiled, because true liberation is not just in confession, but in the act of recognizing one's own power to change the course of history. This type of experience, as mysterious as it may seem, is not as rare as one might think. Many people have felt something similar, have experienced moments when an invisible presence seemed to be there, guiding, whispering, waiting for the right time to manifest itself. And perhaps you, who are watching now, have already experienced something like this, even if you couldn't name it at the time. Sometimes what's missing is not the sign. It's the willingness to see what it's trying to show. Comment here, I'm on this journey too. If this story in some way awakened something in you, what happened in the hours following the confession seemed to have been orchestrated by invisible hands, as if the entire universe had been waiting for that moment to begin moving. Soon after, the girl told what she knew without fanfare, but with the pure honesty of someone who could no longer keep it to herself. The information reached the ears that really needed to know. And what unfolded next was fast, almost unbelievable. The person involved, that figure the girl had seen doing something wrong, something dangerous, was discovered. Not by chance, not by gossip, but by a sequence of events that seemed to connect in an almost choreographed way. A forgotten note, an innocent comment made by someone at the right time, a suspicious look, and suddenly, the truth came to light, in an irrefutable way. But the most impressive thing was yet to come. In the same week, an incident that could have caused tragedy was avoided by minutes. Literally minutes. A flaw that no one had noticed, but which was there, about to become a disaster, and which was only identified because the authorities, alerted by the girl's confession, decided to act. They reviewed details that would normally be ignored, changed the course of an important decision, took measures that seemed excessive until then. And that was exactly what saved lives. It is no exaggeration to say that that intervention changed the course of everything, and when the girl's mother heard the developments, she couldn't hold back her tears, because he understood there that dream, repeated night after night, with the same angel, with the same request, was not just a child's fantasy. It was a calling, a clear guidance that came from something much greater, and that chose to manifest itself through the pure sensitivity and available heart of an 8-year-old girl. This type of immediate protection, which seems to happen out of nowhere, is often the result of an invisible sequence of movements that begin within us. It all starts with a decision, a small choice that makes room for something bigger to come in. And when we allow ourselves to listen, even if it is in a dream, in a shiver, in a sensation that is difficult to explain, we begin to be part of an alignment that goes far beyond what the human eye can understand. The most curious thing is that, looking from the outside, those who see the events later might think that it was all a coincidence, that the discovery was the result of investigation, that the accident was avoided thanks to good protocol, that the details were all under control. But those who experienced it firsthand, and especially those who were touched by this message before it all happened, know that it wasn't just that. You know there is a hidden truth behind appearances, that behind the visible, there is a kingdom acting, often silently but always with precision. This girl's journey teaches us about confidence, about how even in the face of fear, it is worth following that inner calling, about how our decisions, even the simplest ones, have the power to change entire destinies. Because when we choose to speak, choose to act, choose to be a channel of what is just, the invisible responds, and respond in a concrete way. It's not easy to realize this when you're in the middle of a storm, when the signs are still confusing and everything seems meaningless. But that's where true transformation lies. It's at this point that our mindset changes, when we understand that we're not just reacting to the world, but co-creating with it. That there's a greater wisdom operating behind the scenes, guiding us even when the paths seem too dark. This miraculous outcome is not just a reward for doing the right thing. It is the natural consequence of aligning with what is true. Because when the truth comes in, fear loses ground, and when fear goes away, clarity takes over. Decisions cease to be reactive and become conscious, and that changes everything. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what happened to this girl is not an isolated event. There are other cases, other stories, other lives, transformed by something that, at first glance, seemed like just a hunch, a vision, a dream. And understanding how these signs work, how they communicate with our conscience, and most importantly, what happens when we choose to obey this inner voice, can reveal paths that you may never have considered. Write it down. That makes sense to me. If this story touched you on some deeper level, maybe this has happened to you, and you didn't realize it. That strange feeling that you needed to change your route at the last minute, the sudden urge to call someone for no apparent reason, and discover that that call made all the difference. Or that unexplained delay that made you miss an appointment, and later you discover that it saved you from something bad. These details that we usually treat as coincidence, in fact, can be the silent behind the scenes of something much bigger working in our favor. There are countless reports, discreet, moving, some even inexplicable, of people who only understood what they were experiencing after it was all over, and when they look back, they realize they were not alone. One of the most remembered cases to this day is that of a young woman who, upon returning from a trip, decided to change her flight at the last minute. She couldn't explain why. He just said he felt restless. The new flight was delayed, so she arrived home later, tired but safe. The original flight? He suffered a serious breakdown and made an emergency landing with several injured. She only found out days later and was in shock. It was like someone had screamed inside me. "Go another way," she said. Another widely reported story is about a man who worked in a high-rise building and one ordinary morning decided to go out to buy a coffee outside the office, even though he had already had one at home. As he was walking down, he had the feeling that he needed to walk to a place farther away without knowing why. That simple choice kept him away from the building when an internal accident caused an explosion on one of the floors. Nothing has been proven to be supernatural, but he himself said he felt a presence, as if he were being guided calmly but firmly. And there are also the more intimate stories, those that rarely make it into the newspapers, but that have a profound impact on those who experience them. Like the woman who felt the need to pray for a friend in the middle of the night, even though she hadn't heard from her in days. Later, she discovered that, at that very moment, her friend was facing a serious health crisis and was receiving help. "I can't explain it, but it was like someone woke me up and said, 'Now,'" she said, her eyes filling with tears. These examples are repeated with variations, with different details, in different parts of the world, and in all age groups. Simple. People, ordinary people, living their routines, and being touched by something that cannot be seen but that can be felt. The presence of angels does not always manifest itself in an extraordinary way. Often it reveals itself in the most subtle gestures, in the simplest intuitions, in the warnings that arrive in the silence. And that's why sometimes the secret is in listening. Because there is no shortage of signs. What is often lacking is the sensitivity to perceive them. Everyday life anesthetizes us with noise, haste, and distractions. But when the heart becomes still, when the soul allows this internal space, things that previously went unnoticed begin to make sense. We begin to understand that we are not at the mercy of chance, that there is an intention behind certain encounters, certain pauses, certain unexpected detours along the way. These episodes are not just curious stories. They are living reminders that there is a constant care for us, even when the world seems silent, even when we feel alone, even when the pain seems to have no purpose. There is something greater taking care of everything. And it is precisely in the most unlikely moments that this care reveals itself. You may never have seen a light in the sky or heard a clear voice, but what about that time when you decided to come back, suddenly, for no reason, and felt peace afterwards? Or that moment when you felt an unexpected force pulling you out of place at the exact moment something bad was about to happen? These small interventions may seem invisible, but they have a profound impact on the journey of those who pay attention. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding how these messages arrive and how to develop this inner listening can completely transform the way you live your decisions and how you interpret the backstage of your own story. Write it down. I'm on this journey. 2. If any part of this triggered a memory for you, perhaps the most challenging part of all this is not recognizing the signs, but accepting that they are coming to you. This is where many people get stuck, because deep down there is that silent question, why me? Or, is this really real? And it is in this space between skepticism and sensitivity that one of the greatest transformations in life lies, when we stop looking at the invisible as a coincidence and start seeing it as a direct conversation between heaven and our inner self. There are times when the signs are as clear as a scream, but most of the time they come softly, like a whisper. A specific song that plays exactly when you are in doubt about a decision. A book that falls off the shelf, opening on a page that answers something you didn't even have the courage to ask out loud. An unexpected encounter with someone who, without knowing anything, says the exact phrase that makes you see a situation in a different light. These messages don't come with captions or signatures, but if you pay attention, you will realize there is an intelligence behind all of this, and it is personal. It is targeted, it is not generic, it is not random. It speaks directly to what you feel, what you live, what you carry in silence. So now I want to invite you to something deeper. It's not a technique. It's not a step-by-step guide. It's just a pause. A moment of true listening, because maybe there's something you're keeping inside that you need to let out. An old pain, a truth that was silenced, a guilt that's been silently accompanying you. Maybe it doesn't need to be for someone else yet, but it needs to be for you. Because while your heart is muffled by secrets, it's hard to hear any other voice, even the one that comes from above. Have you ever noticed how, when we allow ourselves this kind of openness, certain things start to move? It's as if the universe says, now you're ready to listen. And from that moment on, dreams take on a clearer tone. Small coincidences start to repeat themselves. Certain situations align in such a precise way that it becomes impossible to ignore. This has nothing to do with magic. It has to do with presence. With the inner willingness to say, I am attentive, I am available. Then the signs come because the heavens speak, but they speak to those who are willing to listen. And this listening often begins with a point. What is weighing on my heart at this moment? What do I know deep down that I need to release? Sometimes it is a request for forgiveness. Sometimes it is the forgiveness you need to give. It may be an unspoken word, a trauma you have tried to bury, a decision that has been postponed for too long. When these things are kept hidden, they become layers that stifle sensitivity. But when they are brought to light, with courage, with truth, the field opens up, and the spiritual comes closer with greater clarity. This is why many angelic manifestations appear in moments of crisis, pain, and vulnerability, not because these are bad times, but because they are moments when the ego is silenced and the soul expands. It is in this space that the signs find their way, and it is not just to comfort you, it is to guide you, to reposition you, to remind you that you are not here adrift, even if everything is confusing. And it doesn't have to be something grand like an apparition. It could just be that shiver that comes without explanation, that light that blinks 3 times, just when you're thinking about something important. That butterfly that lands on your arm at the exact moment you're praying for clarity. Small things, but with an impact that goes beyond rationality. The secret is not in the size of the sign, but in the depth with which it touches you. This is where one of the hidden truths that few people talk about comes in. Sometimes the sign doesn't come to give you an answer. It comes to remind you that you still have questions that are too important to keep ignoring. And when that realization hits you, a lot of things change. The way you deal with your choices, your fears, your relationships, everything starts to reorganize itself from the inside out. Because now it's not just you acting, it's you walking together with something bigger. Therefore, this reflection is not about mysticism. It is about lucidity. It is about courage. It is about creating inner space for the sky to speak, not just once, but continually. Because when we create this connection, it remains. It evolves, and it becomes a compass in the midst of chaos. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding why these signs come to some people so intensely, while others seem to live in complete spiritual silence, can reveal something essential about your moment in life. Comment here. That makes sense to me, if this conversation touched you in any way. You know, there's something you may have noticed on your own journey. The more you connect with what's true within you, the easier it becomes to notice when the invisible touches the visible. It's not about predicting the future or controlling everything. It's about noticing the signs the moment they appear, because your perception has changed, your sensitivity has increased, and with it, your trust in something greater has grown. This trust does not come out of nowhere. It is built, little by little, behind the scenes of everyday life. On the nights when you look up at the ceiling and feel that you are not alone, even if the silence says otherwise. In the difficult decisions you make with your heart racing, but with your intuition screaming, go. In the encounters that change the course of your life, even if they started out as a simple coincidence. That is when the angelic presence reveals itself, not as a spectacle, but as a silent force that reorganizes chaos with ease, without needing to prove anything. And even though many people still view this with suspicion, the truth is that the signs are everywhere. What changes is the willingness to see. It's as if the sky was saying, I keep talking, but are you willing to listen? And when you respond with sincerity, with dedication, with humility, something aligns, something starts to make sense, and then what once seemed strange becomes familiar. What was once just a coincidence now has a purpose. What was just a vague feeling becomes direction. That's why some people report such striking experiences. Dreams that warned them of imminent accidents. Voices that said, don't go, minutes before a serious unforeseen event. Sudden sensations of stopping the car, changing route, cancelling an appointment, and then realizing that if they had continued as planned, something very bad would have happened. This is not paranoia. It is refined perception. It is alignment, with a reality that goes beyond matter. And here comes an important point. This connection is not a privilege for a few. It is a right for everyone. But like any true connection, it requires presence, consistency, and openness. It is like a radio frequency. If you tune into the right channel, you hear clearly. But if you are distracted, anxious, with your mind full of noise, the sound is lost. And that is precisely why many people do not hear. Not because there is no signal, but because there is too much interference. You don't need to become a monk or radically change your lifestyle. But you do need to allow yourself moments of real silence. spaces where you can listen to what's inside, because often the message from above doesn't come from outside. It echoes within you first. It's that intuition that insists, even when everyone says otherwise. It's that feeling that grows, even when logic tries to stifle it. And the more you respect these subtle impulses, the more you strengthen your connection with this divine intelligence. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because there is something that needs to be said. Even when you don't listen, even when you ignore the signs or doubt your own sensitivity, the angels are still around you. They don't give up on you. They don't move away because you faltered or got lost. On the contrary, in your most difficult moments, they come even closer, and they do whatever it takes to remind you that you have not been forgotten. Some people feel it as an unexpected warmth, an invisible embrace. Others describe it as a peace that invades them out of nowhere, even in the midst of chaos. And there are those who only realize it later, when they look back and realize, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be here today. This is protection. This is intervention. This is divine care, even when the world around you seems to be falling apart. So if you've ever experienced something like this, or if, after hearing all this, some memory came to the surface, maybe this is the moment to validate what you previously called coincidence. Maybe it's time to accept that there is something bigger, yes, following you closely. Something that speaks through the details, the synchronicities, the encounters that change everything. And that maybe it tried to warn you more than once. It was just waiting for you to open up and listen. So tell me, have you ever felt like an angel was trying to communicate with you? Have you ever experienced something that you couldn't explain, but that left a deep impression on you? Leave your story here in the comments, because believe me, what you experienced can touch other people too. If this makes sense to you, write it down. I'm on this journey too. Now, let's move on, because there's still something you need to hear. If you've come this far, it's because something inside you connected with this message, and that says a lot. It's a sign that you're paying attention, that your sensitivity is awake, and that this type of content makes sense for your journey. So, if this space brought you peace, clarity, or even that confirmation you needed, subscribe to the channel. That way you'll continue receiving stories that touch us deeply, that make us rethink everything, and remember that the invisible also has a voice. And if you felt that this conversation was made for you, leave a comment below. This message was for me. It's a simple way of saying that the connection has happened, and of showing that there are more people walking together. Oh, and leave a like on the video, not for the gesture itself, but because it shows that this type of exchange is worthwhile. That it has value, that it deserves to continue. There is a video here on the side that complements this subject. Click and continue with me there. The conversation is not over yet.